I was born in the late 80s, but I have always had an appreciation for television animation from the previous decades. I didn't really have a strong grasp on the time things were made, so not everything made before I was born seemed old to me. While watching series like Transformers and Goshogun, I thought that they were made during my lifetime. On the other hand, stuff like Rocky and Bullwinkle as well as Yogi Bear and his friends seemed old. Not that there is anything wrong with that. I personally loved how these shows looked. There is something about the art style of 60s cartoons that I always found very appealing. I even used to think that these were the first cartoons ever made until I saw Dumbo reference at the end of this Potamus episode.
I've heard of a horsefly.
Yeah, and even a housefly.
But a dinosaur fly? Never!
I can even enjoy some shows from this decade despite never having seen them as a kid, be they curiosities like Super 6, which is okay but has some things I really liked about it, or quality series such as George of the Jungle, although it's only because of his co-stars Super Chicken and Tom Slick. The George segments are okay but nowhere near as funny as the movie, which I hold is the gold standard for live-action movies based on cartoons. Animated George's co-stars, however, still have that classic J-Ward charm to them.
Oh, I'm so sorry!
I accept your apology, but that rankles a bit.
If you asked me what my favorite 60s cartoons were, I would say Jonny Quest, followed by Scooby-Doo for representing the best Hanna-Barbera had to offer at the time, but partially because they would go on to have even better reboots and sequels. Aside from them, or if you asked me what my favorite 60s cartoon was, based solely on what was made during the decade, I would say without any hesitation that it was Batfink. For whatever reason, I just fell in love with this cartoon as a kid, and I still love it today. It is exactly as good as I remember it, and while it's definitely not a serious contender for the best cartoon ever made, I still love it for what it is, and I feel that it is very unique. With one exception, all of the reviews I have seen for it on YouTube are negative, so I felt like giving some much-needed love to this underrated gem. Batfink was a cartoon series created by Hal Seeger that ran from 1966 to 1967 about a superhero bat who fought crime alongside his sidekick Karate. It was made to be a parody of the Adam West Batman series, with Karate being a parody of Kato from the Green Hornet. Batfink uses his supersonic sonar radar and bulletproof wings made of steel to fight crime throughout 100 shorts. I discovered this thanks to the Nickelodeon show Weinerville. For those of you who don't remember it, Weinerville was a puppet show hosted by Mark Weiner. It was a weird series, but I liked it at the time.
Why must you guys always argue?
It's in our contract?
It makes sense.
The best part was Boney, a dinosaur skeleton who was a Barney parody.
Little Red Riding Hood walked into the forest to take a basket to her grandmother. How sweet! You're breaking my heart!
Weinerville always played one or two old cartoons like the original Alvin and the Chipmunks, the theatrical Mr. Magoo shorts, and Honey Halfwitch. Yeah, aside from the first two I mentioned, the shorts they played weren't exactly well known. I have a feeling that it was because they could get them cheap. No disrespect to them, I enjoyed seeing these old cartoons that looked like nothing else on the air. The more obscure shorts I can remember the most are Georgie and the Dragon, a cute little cartoon with livelier animation than most of the shorts shown on Weinerville, and The Fuzz, about an inept superhero directed by Ralph Bakshi of all people. I guess this is why they asked him to make Mighty Mouse funny.
Now I know why they call television a medium, because nothing on it is rare or well done.
That's how Weinerville started, and for a time my favorite cartoons they played were the Clyde Crash Cup segments from the Alvin Show. But then one day Batfink flew in and nothing would be the same. Unfortunately, I cannot remember my initial exposure to Batfink at all. I can usually remember the first time I saw a series I consider a true favorite, or when I trade up for something better. I can't remember my first Mickey Mouse cartoon, but I can remember my first Bugs Bunny one because of how hilarious it was.
What a performance, Doc Canyon! What a performance!
While I can't remember the first time I saw The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, I watched it enough that I remember discovering the more serious Saturday morning version because it was surreal seeing the same character transplanted into a completely different series, but it quickly became my preferred Sonic show.
Well, show a little patience. Hey, patience are for hospitals. We're in Robo Country, and that makes me itchy.
Because of that gap in my memory, it feels like I have always loved Batfink, even though I know that there had to be a point where I didn't. When Weinerville started playing Batfink every episode, it made the whole show better in my opinion. I didn't just like it, I felt like I had stumbled across something special. Even though I continued to enjoy the show as it was, I waited with bated breath for when it came time to cut to Batfink. I know that I'm not the only Batfink fan out there, but sometimes I wonder if I'm the only 90s kid who thrilled to his exploits despite having so much modern stuff, and even more so if it had the biggest lasting impact on me out of all of the people who were introduced to it thanks to Nickelodeon. Honestly, I like it better than all of the 90s Nicktoons except for Angry Beavers and Real Monsters! Maybe the Wild Thornberries and Chalk Zone as well. One day when it came time for Weinerville to play a cartoon, to my surprise and dismay, it was not Batfink but another Batman parody, Courageous Cat and Minute Mouse. I continued to watch Weinerville and even came to like Batfink's replacement, although it was never the same. But having watched some of it again, I must have been really desperate for anything close to Batfink because it did not hold up. The pacing is sluggish, the characters are dull, and there is little to no humor. Despite being made in 1960, it feels more primitive than the Hanna-Barbera cartoons from the 50s, like Snooper and Blabber, who were always the superior cat and mouse duo in my book.
Television studio? Say, listen, how would you like to put on me life story? Yeah, it's being written now.
I wish that they had been able to replace Batfink with Super Chicken instead. At the time, I would have been hesitant about anything replacing Batfink, but I would have quickly considered Super Chicken to be an equivalent exchange.
Try, Fred, and I'll think.
What about?
I'm trying to figure out where Rotten Hood is hiding.
Why don't you use your supervision?
If I had any supervision, I wouldn't be running around in this funny suit.
In fact, I'll admit it. While I think that Batfink is a better show overall than George of the Jungle, when you compare their episodes individually, Super Chicken is better made.
If you want a thing done, and you want it do, and you do it right, yourself, it's no good. I just can't deliver one-liners.
I never saw Batfink again until 2007 when I started to occasionally find episodes on YouTube. They were about as good as I remembered, it was just that my appetite had changed and just one or two at a time wasn't enough for me anymore. I wanted a full 20 minutes, but they were good enough that I felt comfortable getting the DVD for Christmas that year. Even so, I was still surprised that the series held up as well as it did. Let's get the negatives out of the way first, though. Karate is drawn with buck teeth and has an English accent in early episodes, but eventually they changed his design to make him less racist, although some of these early shorts still aired on Nickelodeon. As every episode is only 5 minutes, it's a pretty simple show. You will be hearing a variety of catchphrases over and over. The animation is dated and production values are cheap with only 2 guys doing the voices. This is definitely not a show for everyone, but personally I unironically love it. As I have said before, I do not mind how the show looks one bit as I truly enjoy 60s style animation despite how crude some people may say the artwork is.
Did someone suck all the life out of the universe?
No, they just figured out how to draw things really flat.
There is more movement and facial expression shown here than in a lot of Filmation cartoons. The animation may be cheap, but they did a good job with the character designs, making almost all of the villains look completely different from each other. The highlight here is Batfink's character design. The yellow uniform, gray fur, red gloves and boots, as well as the black wings make up an unusual color scheme that blends together nicely for a unique look. Honestly, in some shots Batfink looks really cool. I think that part of it is the wings. I mean, just look at them. I can't think of any 60s character who looks like Batfink. I even love his name. I have to admit that from a certain point of view it is a questionable name, as a Ratfink isn't a good person. When I asked my sister if she remembered Batfink years after it left the air and I was telling her about him, my mother understandably asked if I was sure that Batfink was such a nice character, to which I replied, "Of course, he was one of my heroes." She believed me, but I can't help but wonder if other people couldn't see past the name. Even as a kid, I would have never held a real Ratfink as a hero. For example, I loved the Beetlejuice cartoon, but I always knew that at best he was just a jerk with a heart of gold. In some episodes, the moral of the story was, Don't be like this guy. But with Batfink being my introduction to the term Fink, I have to admit that Batfink is a fun-sounding title. It's one of those titles that just rolls off the tongue for me like War Planets or Voltron, and maybe having an ironic name is the joke. His name is Batfink, but he's a Pheno, a Fink in name only.
Let's see how safe the rubber bridge is, Chief. Just because we're endangering our lives, Karate, that's no reason to expect a free ride.
One of the biggest reasons I can still enjoy Batfink as much as I do is that I think it was deliberately cheap and tacky. It's as if the producers looked at the budget and thought, well, no matter how well written it is, it's going to feel cheap, so let's have some fun with it. The writing and voice acting are so over the top at times, it feels like they know it's ridiculous. Sometimes I can enjoy something so bad that it's unintentionally funny, but it's so much more enjoyable when it feels like the creators are in on the joke. Part of the charm about 60s cartoons is their simplicity. You either like them or you don't. Usually my criticism of a pre-80s cartoon can simply boil down to, I don't think it's funny, unlike later cartoons which can have a variety of significant narrative problems. I have seen people criticize this series by asking about the logic of how Batfink can fly with steel wings and move them despite not having nerve endings, as well as why the characters can interact with the narrator, to which I say, it's a comedy cartoon, it doesn't need to make sense. I don't see you questioning these things in Rocky and Bullwinkle or Looney Tunes.
I know this defies the law of gravity, but, you see, I never studied law.
Batfink does a great job evoking the campy feel of the Adam West Batman series while still having its own unique flavor. Only two guys may have done all of the voices, but they picked two very talented voice actors. Len Maxwell was a stand-up comedian who moved on to voiceover work. He starred in many commercials, including some where he voiced the Hawaiian Punch mascot Punchy. He voiced Karate, the Chief of Police, many villains, and the narrator. He was good in all of his roles. Karate is a loyal sidekick whose relationship with Batfink runs deeper than you would think.
This time I'll protect myself from that ray with a blindfold. I always have one in my utility sleeve. A billfold? A folding bill? The rent bill? I know I've got a blindfold in here someplace.
The Chief, while the weakest recurring character, still has some good moments.
I'll be over before you can say Jack Robinson. I have enough trouble saying the priceless pink pearl of Persia. Well, I'm sure glad we're finished with the priceless pink pearl of Persia. Oh, no! Something wrong, Chief? Someone just stole the sacred Siamese star sapphire of Sicily!
But my favorite role of his was the narrator.
Television history. The great English actor Sir Saul Illiqui rehearses for his American debut as Macbeth, using Macbeth's original priceless jewel dagger.
I love over-the-top narrators in comedic series like this, and he is one of my favorite narrators ever. Every episode during the climax he interrupts the action just as Batfink is in a perilous death trap. I must admit, as a kid, these pauses were tense because I was scared Batfink wouldn't make it. Now, though, I think that they are hilarious because he usually gets great lines.
To add a little interest to the game, the udder pins are filled with nitroglycerin. What's this? The end of Batfink? If it's a strike, then Batfink won't be spared, and Bold Brummel will have left his mark on the entire city.
In one episode, he even saves Batfink by stalling for time.
What happened? While the narrator stopped the action, I had just enough time to reverse the polarity of the detonator wires.